Yeah, we're live. 6:51. I'm early. Today I want to celebrate, not my achievement, but the Corvette guys. That's awesome that they actually took the car out, I think with the guys from Car and Driver, and went out to a, closed course, some sort of research facility, big long oval or some kind of thing, and managed to get that 1,064 horsepower twin turbo Corvette to go just a skosh over half a mile an hour, over 233 miles an hour, which that's amazing. That's really fast. And I remember when this car first came out, they were talking about, oh, look, here's some, and they probably held on to this stuff, held on to the true top speed of the thing because they wanted to say, oh, this thing goes over 200. Yeah, it should. I mean, that's it's about twice as much power as I would think that they would need to go 200. But the cool thing is that because they were talking about, oh yeah, so watch this car. Here's a video of this car going from like 0 to 207 or something. And like, oh yeah, oh, but we think that this car will go more than 215 miles an hour. I'm like, yeah, if it's got 1,064 horsepower. Even in a body style that I don't think is terribly aerodynamic, 1,000 horsepower stuff goes really fast. And I'm glad that they finally did it. The interesting thing, I was reading a little bit about the stuff that the guys from Car and Driver did. And one of the things that they asked them, because they're car guys, which is exactly the same thing that I would have asked them, well, what RPM were you at? So we want to look at gearing versus power versus, and they said that we were at the red line in top gear. So like, okay, that they planned that perfectly, assuming that the peak power comes at red line, in the RPM range, which I kind of doubt that it does. It's not very often does an American manufacturer ever put peak power at red line. Now, Ferrari has been known to do that, and they've done that on a few of their things where the power just keeps climbing. To me, that's an indication that maybe they should have changed the camshaft or the intake manifold or whatever, or raise the red line. Because, the motor should rev. Typically, motors rev past where the motor makes peak power at. And so I was thinking exactly the same thing when they're running this. Like, okay, well, what if, and because when they said, yeah, we ran it to red line in top gear, I'm like, oh, okay, well, you need more gearing. And they asked him, do you think that this thing would benefit from having like taller gearing? So that in the engineer, I think the guy that drove the Corvette said, no, I think that that's all of it. I think that that's all that it will do. I tend to not think that. If the horsepower peak didn't happen at that peak engine speed, at that maximum engine speed that they ran the car at, if it happened earlier than that, they probably could go a little faster. Again, not that they need to, because if it goes 230 or 3 or 235 or whatever the number is, I don't think that they're going to gain 10 miles an hour by changing the gearing, because that's not it. That sort of power with that car, the aero of that car, and that speed kind of, I think, all go together. When they were saying, oh yes, this thing went from 0 to 207, I'm like, it's not done there. And then they're saying, oh yeah, we think it'll go 215. I'm like, there's no way that it only goes 215. It has to go a lot faster than that. If it's making 1,000 horsepower, which it seems like it is without any problem. And quite honestly, and this is something that I wanted to be on another like show with somebody, another interview with somebody. Because I want to, in fact, I might do this with Chad or Freiberger or one of those guys. Because what I want to talk about is how and I'm not sure that they still do it like that. I think that this would be a good opportunity to do this, but I think that they would be worried about being caught anymore. Because back in the day, the OEMs would supply press cars to the press, and the press would then test them. So, Automobile would get one, and Car and Driver and Road and Track, and, all Motor Trend, all these guys would get into Hot Rod, and they would get cars to test them. And then the magazine guys would put the cars through their paces. Oh, well, the the manufacturer saying this car goes from, 0 to 60 was a common thing. It'd go from 0 to 60 in this speed, and it would run the quarter mile in this, and it would do a top speed of this thing. The top speed things were always my favorite thing. When they would actually go and test it somewhere where you could really get the top speed. Now, because I grew up as a kid loving this, Lamborghinis and things like that, that was my thing. Not ever really realizing that you can't really go do that. I mean, if it takes you 2 or 3 or 5 miles or whatever to get to the maximum speed of the car, where is that usable other than some kind of silver state thing? You're just not going to be able to do it. Really, the acceleration up to speed is going to be much more usable, like we talk about with the small camshaft. 95% of the people pick the camshaft that I sell, the low buck truck camshaft, because it makes more power up to 5,000. They're way more interested in that fun part of it that they're using all the time than they are about doing a top speed thing or making more power from 5 to 6 or 7 or wherever they're going to rev it to. They're way more interested in that. But for me, while I'm reading down the list of top speed things, you go right to the big boys. You go right to the Lamborghini and to the Ferrari, and later on Bugatti and whatever all these things are, where the speed started getting ludicrous. But that was my thing, and I thought it was very cool. But it's also cool that really, as short of like the Autobahn or the Transportation Research Center or the Volkswagen Proving Grounds or whatever, where are you going to do that? Even if you have a Bugatti Veyron and you could take it out to 250 or whatever it would go, where are you going to do that? Where can you go that fast? Maybe there are roads in Wyoming or Texas or Montana or something where you can actually do that. I know that there are some in Nevada because the Silver State is out there, and I know that there are some long, lonely stretches. But if you're doing that and a deer runs across the road, or there's a cow, or anything bad, you're going to hit it because you can't slow down from that kind of speed in any sort of short period of time. So the top speed thing is, it's of limited usage. But the nice thing about a twin turbo 1,064 horsepower Corvette is it also accelerates very, very well, probably at any speed. The great thing about turbo stuff is not only does it make a lot of power, but it makes a lot of torque, particularly in OEM applications where they can dictate the shape of the power curve. Okay, we can have boost come on. We can size the turbos and size the displacement of the motor and the cam timing, the intake manifolds, and all the sort of trickery that we want to put in this thing. We can make this have the curve that we want. We can limit it in spots, which has been common in turbo cars and OEM applications for a long time. We can limit it in spots because we want to save the drivetrain, and we can make it come on the big end if we want to do that. My Omni is a perfect example of that, limiting the torque production to save the transmission, particularly in the 2.5 stuff. That's pretty normal. What I was originally, and where I went off on a tangent here, what I was originally talking about was the OEMs would supply the magazine guys like, hopped up versions of the cars. So if the Corvette guys had said, oh, you guys are going to do a top speed test. Okay, that's cool. Well, it's a turbo car. So you go do the little magic thing on the ECU and go, okay, now it's running 20 pounds or 25 pounds or whatever. We know it's going to be safe. We know it'll make runs like that. So it's fine. Just take it out and do it. And all of a sudden they go 240 or 250 or whatever their number is. And they go lots faster. Back in the day, I think that happened. I think that was much more prevalent. It's one of the things that I wanted to talk to Freiberger about is if he ever got to drive any of these press cars that he thought were hopped up. Shelby was notorious for doing this. And I think did that with the Omni GLHS. I think that they turned the boost up in it when they gave it to the press guys. Definitely did that sort of rigmarole with the Cobra that he offered to all of the magazines back in the day when the Cobra was first introduced. Oh, we got a whole bunch of these. It was the same car that they repainted and gave to different people. So that sort of stuff happened. And so when they would give give a car magazine, hey, it's a new tri-power GTO. Well, it's gonna, if and this is the thing, if they're doing their job and they want to promote the car, then it should have come with a, maybe a little bit hotter version, maybe the Monday build of the motor, maybe it was a little bit blueprinted. Maybe it had a little bit hotter than production camshaft in it. All of that stuff, all of that stuff is certainly possible. I'd like to talk to somebody that really knows that happened, because here's the problem from the OEM side when you're talking about stuff like this, is that if you supply, like they supplied a Corvette that went out and went 240 or 245 because they turned the boost up, and then other people couldn't do that, you'd immediately have lawsuits and there would be problems with that, because that's how society is now. Before, I think that we didn't have the internet the way that we have now, and the word doesn't get out there like that. So if you supplied a GTO and it went 1320s, and then every other one went 1420s, you're saying, oh, that's just a driver, that's just a track. You know, you could make up all kinds of excuses for that kind of stuff and go, yeah, these guys just don't know how to drive. Like, you know, look at their 60-foot time. This one was prepped, and this was our pro driver. You know, you could make up all kinds of things. Anymore, that's not. I think that's less likely. And you know, I like arguing it both ways. Okay, yes, they should be telling us the truth and giving us an actual representation of what a production car is. The other side of me wants them to do the cool stuff. I want the engineers to get involved and go, you know, what if the one that we had had this motor in it from the dyno rather than this one? And then so we know it's going to do well. It's going to put its best foot forward and run 1320 instead of 1420. I want them to do that because I want car guys to be like that. You know, the other part of me wants them to have it be an actual representation of what everybody gets. But, you know, sometimes that probably did not happen. See what you guys got going on tonight. Start a poll. Okay, is there more left in the 233 mile an hour Corvette ZR1 if they change the gearing? So do you think that more gearing would help that thing? Again, not that it really makes any difference, because 233 is like way beyond what people would be able to drive anyway, though. So, but that's all good. Tim, what's going on? Untrue knowledge. Springfield, Illinois. Shout out from Alberta, Canada. Nice. 233 miles an hour for how many miles? I don't know how long it would go that far. They didn't say that. I think the problem is that in their testing, they run out of room before they run out of ability of the car. I think when they were doing Bugatti testing, that they would run out of fuel pretty quickly too. Make the car slicker. Yeah. It's not. I would be curious to see how the aero is on that car versus like a C4 car. Or a C6. If I had 581 horsepower in my 6.2 with a stock crank, what would it be with a 4125 crank? Well, the first thing I would suggest is you don't ever think about putting a 4125 crankshaft in there in a 6.2 block, because the sleeves are not long enough, and you're going to pull the piston out of the bottom of the hole. You're going to get ring flutter and stuff, and it's just going to be generally bad. We don't normally recommend cranks more than 4 inches in a production block. And unless you re-sleeve it and make the sleeve length longer. Porsche ran 248 at Le Mans for 24 hours back in 1970. Top speed has always made me 240. Why couldn't their 962s go that fast? Because when they did the shootout for Road and Track, the 962 didn't go as fast as the Cup car did. The Cup car went 240, and I thought that the 962 only went like mid 220s or something. Top speed's always made me nervous. Yeah, it is. 0 to 60 is what I determine fast is. That's quick. That's a different thing. But yeah, after hauling my car 2,400 miles round trip to the duct tape drags, I realized in my rush I didn't check wide open throttle, so I had a 2-barrel Holly. Uh-oh. Still ran 13.0. Yeah. That's a big thing, actually. And that cruising with Kevin, you have no idea how often that has to be fixed, both on the engine dyno and on the chassis dyno, and from chassis dynos going way back. Steve at Powertrain, the guys at the show shop. having a and not just on carbureted stuff, sometimes on throttle body, on EFI stuff too. I can remember on the turbo setup that we put on that Grand Am, the floor mat was stopping the thing from going to wide open throttle too. So that stuff has to be checked and made sure of, which is one of the things I don't like about drive-by-wire throttle bodies, because unless I can see it, like I like being able to see the throttle body go to wide open throttle. The TPS has 100 on the data logging, but I can see that the throttle body's open all the way. I can also see that sometimes the throttle body will open over center, and so we can try to adjust that if that's necessary, or test it to see if it's necessary. I'm going to get the low buck truck cam from you. Can you tell me what gaskets or consumables I might need to purchase to do the cam swap or any other thing that are necessary? You're Douglas, you're definitely going to need springs. So Brian Tooley has $79 springs, or you can use 550 lift stock LS3, LS7 springs. 917/30, 917 long tail. Top speed of those cars are pretty much just for bragging rights. Don't swerve for wildlife. Yeah, you don't want to end up in the ditch out in the desert in Nevada. There's rocks and cactus and all sorts of bad things, culverts and ditches and all sorts of terrible. I wonder how much downforce it has at 200. $250 miles an hour with 4-speed on a bias ply tire. Turbos are very versatile. That's right. Of course, ringers. Celine got caught sending ringers into the magazines. That wouldn't surprise me at all. We tested the LT rockers on LS heads. I've been told they're 1/8. Michigan Motorsports has a kit to put 1/8 on a. I'd have to look into that. Or is the length even right on those? My father used to say, Kyle, what's going on? My father used to say, give him a straight road from Michigan to Florida, and he could make the trip in 6 hours. Michigan to Florida in 6 hours? That would be really fast. How many G's in a turn? How many feet from 100 to 0? How many seconds for 0 to 100? From 0 to 100 to 0. All of that is good data, and that they used to do a lot of that testing. Alan, what's going on? $917/30. Yes, that had lots of power. That had like mega power. But they didn't run a 917/30 at Le Mans, though, right? 233 is insane. I've only been 167. There has to be so much drag that any incremental increase in speed would take immense amounts of horsepower. Yeah, it's a 25% increase in excuse me, in 25% increase in speed requires 100% increase in horsepower. That's what it takes. Takes stupid amounts of horsepower just to cut through the air at those speeds. Running a 6.2 inch and 7/8, 3-inch collectors, catback, X pipe. Car sounds really good with 2.5-inch flow masters. So you have 3-inch tubes, but 2.5-inch mufflers. MPG matters to you too. Does it matter? Does the fuel mileage matter at speed, like when they're at wide open throttle? I would imagine that thing gets pretty good fuel mileage under cruise. Speaking of drag, I know that a NASCAR stock car at 200 miles an hour will decelerate at 1G just by closing the throttle. I have a 67 Firebird. I'm building an LS 427, 11-degree heads, 10-1. The Whipple, 229 cam. It sounds like you already have a cam. GM has a tendency to make claims to excite people for marketing purposes. GM certified the C6 convertible to 191. Convertible top, which was latch, sheared off at the mounts at 160. That seems odd that would happen. We went 167 in the Miata, and the top was rock solid. 962s use aerodynamics to keep it stuck to the ground. Top speed wasn't as important. Yeah. Yeah, because you find the balance for the fastest lap. Carcraft did it with a Fox Body 200 back in the day. It did it with a supercharger, 600 horsepower. Yeah, that motor made more power than that, but they kept pitching belts on it. Duttweiler did that motor. It was a pretty serious deal with an R trim on it. Yes, and LT rockers. Well, the LS9 or the LS7 has 1.8 rockers also from the factory, but you can't put an LS9 or you can't put an LS7 rocker on a regular like cathedral port head. So if they're using those, that's fine. And if the length is in the pivot and all that is the same, and you can bolt it in the same location, which would very much surprise me, but if that is, that's good. Felt dumb because I knew I was missing like 100 horsepower, but in my rush, I didn't check it. The secondaries weren't opening at all. Hey, that happens, man. That's experience. You just gained experience. One interesting thing about people driving really fast, even in daily drivers, is most tires from the factory have a pretty low speed rating. Yeah, theirs are not that. That's one of the things that they check very seriously at the Silver State, is because it's pretty easy to make lots of power and go fast, but if you don't have tires that are going to do that, that's not good. 167 to Miata sounds sketchy. It was with the 5-liter Mustang engine in it that was making like 320 at the tires, I think. But I was surprised how rock solid the top was. But the suspension, the weight over the nose was very heavy, and the suspension was terrible. And every time we went over a bump, the car wanted to like just swap ends. It was not. It was a white knuckle ride. Remember when testing the Veyron many years ago and saying the tires could only last a handful of miles at top speed? I would imagine. 100 views and only 21 thumbs up. There's 34 now, but come on, get the thumbs up. We got 109 people here. I knew at 170 my 410 Camaro, the T-tops rattled before I readjusted the latches. Yeah, you don't want those to pop off. What gear would you use to go 220? In what kind of car? The 308 gear in my 5-speed Mustang would go 220 at about 6,000 RPM, a little over that maybe. 6,000 I think was 210. So by 6,500 you were certainly there. My veteran Air Force buddy that did 2 tours in the sandbox was with me, and he freaked out. Thought the doors blew off. Yeah, that's got to be upsetting. In my Mustang, the fastest I went was 196 or 7, I think, out at the Silver State. Richard, I would like to suggest building the shortest possible log manifold for a twin turbo LS. Getting the turbos closer to the exhaust ports helps getting big turbos lit. You think that that's the case? Yeah, in Blake, in my Fox Body, I went 196 in that car with a Vortec on it. 233 is nothing. A C4 was clocked at 254 in 1988. Yeah, with 1,000 horsepower twin turbo motor put in that car, done by Lingenfelter, and in that Callaway Corvette. And they didn't do it right away. It took a while before they got up to speed. But that's not a production car, though. That's an aftermarket car. What do you think the Omni would do top speed? I don't know. Not very much, I don't think. I'm sure it'd be 125 or 30 or something like that, maybe. And 160 on a bike, you could cover distance in a hurry. I can't imagine 250 on anything other than the salt flats. 254 wasn't top speed. They called it quits at 254. They called it quits because they ran out of room or something. Richard, I've got a 4-inch stroke big block Chevy GM steel crank. Okay, so 454, right? It's got H-beam rods, SRP flat tops, 230, 236, thinking twin turbos, which are good aluminum heads to run. And do you recommend Promax? I've run the Promax heads, and all the ones that I've run on the big blocks have been good. I always recommend Airflow Research because you cannot go wrong with an Airflow Research head. The Promax stuff also worked. If you're putting turbos on it anyway, no matter which aluminum heads you pick, you're going to be able to make whatever the turbos can make, so that's not going to be an issue. I wonder how much weight plays a factor versus aerodynamics. Weight doesn't play a factor in top speed. It'd have to be wildly excessive. Top speed is almost all available horsepower versus aero drag. People love the what about game. Just appreciate what GM did for car enthusiasts. Fox body wide ratio T56 with a 315 gear and a 393 945 horsepower. You in a Fox body with 945 horsepower, you're going to go way more than 100. 180 is nothing. We drove 180 for like 90 miles. I mean, that with a Vortec and not even a good Vortec. I mean, it was just a B trim. So that we averaged 167 on that. And then I think it went 178 or 79 or something. Coming to Hot Rod Garage Day. What is that? I signed up for second hatch at failure to reach 12s. Yeah, 945 horsepower is really, really fast and wildly unstable in a Fox body. I think it'd be better to do it in a GT than a like the notch like I have, because if you can slope the back, it would be better. It's probably not going to want to lift as much, but we did a bunch of different wings on mine. What if you had a 4,000-pound Galaxy? It's still, once you get up to speed, it's still the aerodynamic signature of the car. It's not in fact, you guys out at Bonneville often run 6,000-7,000 pound because they've added 1,000 or more pounds of weight in the trunk to get the thing to put power down. So they're not at all concerned with weight. Other than your concern then would be tires for the weight of the vehicle. But, with an aerodynamic load on that, they're concerned with that. So weight's not an issue for Bonneville for top speed. What did GM do for car people? Maybe I should put my C4 on Bring a Trailer. Do you also have a sledgehammer? Duplicate your comp cam junkyard Gen 6 Marine cam build. Put it in a Monte Carlo. That'd be good. Hot Rod Garage Day at Famoso. Where is Famoso at? Summit has some neat cast block hugger style LS LT4 twin manifolds flipped upside down. Yes, in my downjet testing, getting the turbine closer to the exhaust port improves the turbo response. I remember reading that in Corky Bell's thing, and I don't agree with that. I don't agree with a style manifold because it's close is better than a better manifold that's farther away. Can a Celine wing hang on at 200? I would be worried about the Celine wing like ours did, but a Celine wing I think is a terrible idea for top speed. In fact, we took mine off and had my buddy Bernie make one. But Kyle, I would be open to testing that though. Wrapping up a Truck Norris LQ4 Recport. I would say that the style of manifold would have more of a difference, but I can try it. I have some of the really short ones. Who's the guy that Matt? Who's the guy that Matt always uses? They sent me some. And I have to try, because if you're doing this with just distance being the change, then everything else has to be the same. The runner diameter has to be the same. The plenum, the common plenum, that all has to be the same. I would like to see that test. given the minimal change in response from remote turbos versus non-remote turbos, I just don't see how shortening it like 6 inches or a foot is going to make even a noticeable change. Higher elevation, the drag is less. Yeah, and also at a higher elevation, the power production is less. Wrapping up a Truck Norris LQ4 Recport head Impala SS build. That's good. I like those Impala SSs. I tried for a long time when I was at All Chevy magazine to try to get them. I wanted to build a motor for an Impala SS to go 200, which would have been easy. An LT1 base motor with a blower on it. Get it to make, I don't know, 700 or 800 horsepower, or whatever. And it would certainly go 200. And I wanted them to get Dale Earnhardt to drive it when Dale was alive back then, because that's when this was. And they're like, no, we can't do that. I'm like, man, you guys are terrible. Just depressed that the C4s don't get much love. I do. I like them. I think that they're good cars. I think that those were when guys started putting like carbureted and something that wasn't a tune port motor in those cars, they were really fast. Guys brought those out to the Silver State in droves. Guys bringing 500 and 550 horsepower C4s. Those were 200 mile an hour cars. The Famoso is north of Bakersfield. Okay. For a twin turbo 1,000 horsepower street car, 6 liter, what size turbos would you recommend for a rear mount? The GT3582s are kind of always the 1,000 horsepower turbos for twins. Ryan Tooley really hit a home run with a Truck Norris. Yeah, that is a good cam. My truck is a rear mount GT45 and it's pretty responsive. How can you get a turbo to spool as fast as a supercharger? You can't get it to spool as fast as a root supercharger or a twin screw, a positive displacement blower. You can get it to be very responsive, but not like that, though. Anti-lag bypass. Remember the Tim Allen Binsford Impala SS? Yeah. C4 for sale in the next town over for me that's got 43,000 miles on it. He's asking 9,000, sitting there for 4 years now. Doesn't that seem like a lot for a C4? I mean, I thought that those were like less than 5-liter Mustangs now. And if I was going to buy a C4, I'd buy an 84 because nobody likes those. Nobody likes the crossfire injection. So if you're going to take the motor out and put a carbureted motor in there anyway, I prefer 200 mile an hour quarter mile cars. Yeah, you can make lots of power and do that too. Or 200 mile an hour standing half mile cars or standing mile cars. I want a C401. Yeah. And my 85 since 91. I had an 85 also. Iron-headed L98 first year. The bicycle is faster and more valuable than a C4. Wow. Shots fired on the C4. I like the C4s. I think that they're good. My roommate, my guy I've known since I was 4, he had a Corvette. His was an 84. His was a crossfire car. He loved that car. He ended up putting a 383 in it with fully ported Brodex heads that he got from the company that he worked for. Coast Corvette was doing a Trans Am car that they would run limited races, usually the Long Beach Grand Prix. But he got those heads from that program. I don't know what they flowed because I wasn't flowing anything back then, but they look really nice. He put a big roller cam in a 383. So I remember riding in it. It had to be more than 500 horsepower. And I remember making rips down somewhere in Mexico. And it went very fast. Had an 85, now an 89. Like the C4's electric assist turbo can eliminate the lag. A lot of really quick street cars are doing 8 runs now rather than quarters. It's a thing when you start running 200 in the quarter, that's really fast. I did a top end rebuild with AR heads in 93 with a Super Ram intake. Yeah, that's cool. Had a C4 Crossfire and put nitrous on it. I need another C4. Watch the C4 with an LT1 stick shift sell for $4,000 at auction. That would be even better because the LT1 is like a 300 horsepower motor, so that's even better. 1125, 122 in my 86. That's pretty fast. It's a rabbit hole. A 30-inch primary 4-to-1 Weldell header with the correct small turbo worked better than the log. Chasing big numbers with 2 big turbos. The short log manifold helped to light it off. Cool. What's the fastest car and funnest car you've ever? Is that for me? My fastest car is a Honda Civic. That's the Bonneville car we went 226 in. S475R twin 3582 is more responsive on a 6-liter. I don't know which one of those is more responsive. Ben, you've been sick for two weeks. TPI absolutely fantastic for a stock car. If you want to get decent fuel mileage, they're good. They don't rev. I mean, they feel like they're big block power when you first nail them, but then they don't, pass 4,500 or 5,000. You pick twin 6766s or 3582s for 1,000 horsepower. Yes, either one of those would be fine. Currently have a C7Z and a C506, a Targa. That's what my friend's 84 Corvette had the lift-off roof too. I believe they made some good suspension mods after 84 on the C4. The 84 had the stiffest springs in their Z51 package. And then on 85, they softened the rear spring. I'm not sure if they softened the front one also. So that actually softened it up because they wanted the 84 to come in with a bang and be a super handling car, which it did with the gator backs that they had at the time. And then when they went with revised suspension geometry in the later ones, and then bigger 275 tires, instead of the 255s on the 16s. You're going to dyno 390. A 429 is not really scheduled, but a 390 FE would be cool. I've never tried a Pulsar turbo. How'd you get your Civic to go 226? It was a Bonneville car. I don't know if I have a photo of it here somewhere. I think I do. It was a Bonneville car. For a long time, it was actually the world's fastest Honda Civic for years and years and years. In fact, it might still be, although guys have made a lot more power than that. And that car set a bunch of records out at Bonneville, but it was not anything. In fact, we never even used it anywhere. We only were using about half of the power, or 2/3 of the power that we knew that the combination had. Because it was a 2-liter motor, because the class we were in was G, so it had to be sub 2 liters. And we just had a 72 millimeter turbo on it, and it had skunk cams in it. They're just off the shelf cams. It had a ported head. I had 2 motors, so we had one that was a dart block, and the other one was a sleeved GSR block. And we ran, I interchanged the 89 millimeter non-VTEC crank or the 87.2 millimeter GSR crank, so that one of them was a little smaller than the other. But because we were only running about, I think that when we went 226, we did it in the 4th mile, so it was still going to go farther, but we popped the half shaft out. But we were only running about 16 or 17 pounds of boost, and so it was not anywhere near where it could have, because we'd run as much as 29 pounds, I think. Skullman, you hit 236 miles an hour in a Jeep? That seems like a lot. The 85 C4 Corvette set the lowest to the ground. It was lower than an 84. How it ran 154. In an 85, it was 230 horsepower, if I remember right. And it would only do, they did the, what was it, a 307 gear so that they could have a 150-mile-an-hour car. I don't ever remember one going 154 like you're saying. 150, they made it so that it would go that fast. Because the other cars, the 84 car would go like 100 and low 140s. I think my roommate got his to 147 or 148, but we did some things to it. He removed the swirl vanes and put a K&N in it and put headers on it and stuff. And so it was faster than stock. One thing that amazed me about the C4, C6 when I first heard they had leaf springs. Yeah. Our 13 ZIL 1 has a factory top speed of 184. We've added 225 horsepower to it. Yeah, there should be no reason that shouldn't go 200. The ZL1's not terribly aerodynamic, but you have way more horsepower than you need to go that fast. Also, our turbos are the same as any other from China. A single part on a C4 Corvette was designed on a computer. It was an engineering marvel. Fiberglass mono springs. I remember the Corvette place that he was working at. The way that they used to lower the Corvettes is they would cut the fiberglass springs. Like they would cut a notch in them. I'm like, that's a terrible idea. And then they started using those like urethane pads and stuff. Skunk cams are something I haven't heard in forever. 20 years ago, all the Honda guys had skunk stickers on it. Yeah. What gearing and RPM in the Civic? In ours, we had to have we had another final gear made for it because we couldn't use the 440 or the 426 drive from the VTEC and the non-VTEC. We made a 4.0 final drive. The guys from Liberty made it for us. And then we had it in a non-VTEC trans. And so 200 miles an hour came at like 8,000 RPM or so. I'm thinking that we were at like 85 or 8,600 or something. And we had big tires on it too. We had 26-inch tires on it. Yes, an 85 C4 Corvette sat the lowest. Where do you find information like that? And who measured all the different years? I keep having hose clamp trans cooler lines blow off since adding a turbo to my LS Fox with the power glide. Should I upgrade to a cooler with fittings, or is something seriously wrong with the trans? Why are you pressurizing the coolant lines? I mean, the trans cooler lines. Have you done something to the pump or something? JW, the C5 Corvette and the Ferrari F430 are almost identical. The suspensions are almost identical. Elaine, front wheel drive Civic. Yeah, it's a 99 Civic SI is the car. I'm sure I thought that I had I thought that I had a photo of it somewhere. Yeah, a 99 Civic Si. It looks like a little BMW kind of. It's a sedan. I mean, it's a two-door one. The Si is. And in the class we were in, we did a bunch of aero mods to it too. So it had an air dam and a big wing off the back and that kind of stuff. So it was more aerodynamic than stock. I can't find my photo. No, that's not it. I don't know. I have to find it. You should do an intake test of the new Summit Racing intake that looks like a Plasma Man. I haven't seen the Plasma Man one. I've seen the version that they offer, and I think Brian was going to send me one. Brian from Summit. They have one that looks kind of like a high ram. Why not just do a coilover conversion instead of cutting the leaves? You could, but guys just back then didn't want to change the whole suspension, which would have been really expensive, especially from that particular shop. They just wanted to lower it. Richard, nothing to do with the Vette. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a discussion about the Vette. But my Chris Holbrook built 5.4 4-valve Navigator motor is done. Single Brian Tooley T6. 88,102. That's a big turbo. Looking for mid-8s in the Fairmont. Let me know what happens after you guys get it running. Are you guys going to run on the chassis dyno? Monolith was used for cost conservation. Now let's see the Ford Mustang GTD at 325,000 go 233. I know that the Ford GT would go like the one that I had. That would go over 200. It was 202 or 203. But it was like 550 horsepower, at least stock. Thought the max mile per hour could be determined in a math equation. The speed versus gearing and tire size, you can use an equation for that. But you have to have horsepower and the aero drag to really do it properly. And really, you have to go out and try it. I own an 87 Corvette convertible. I used to do tech on Corvette forums and digital Corvettes. Cool. From what I'm told, the LS trunnion kit fits the LT rockers. I'd love to have a cheap 1.8 rocker. I sold Michigan Motorsports, sell them, but can't find them. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if the trunnion kit interchanges, but where the rocker bolts on, where it pivots at, and then the length from the center line of the pivot out to the rocker tip, and then back to where the pushrod cup is, that's the thing that concerns me. eBay turbo on a 2020 Corvette, and I'm doing 230. Okay. On 307 millimeter turbos are 850 now. I think you need a viewer fund to buy one for a test. So what is it you want to try to do with that? You want to see how much power that turbo can make? Our magnetic ride is not working correctly and want advice. Should I get the replacement or maybe put in regular shocks and springs? I don't know. Does anybody have any experience with the Magna ride stuff? Just making boost now about 9 pounds on the trans brake and it blows the lines off. I wonder what you're doing to overpressurize the line. So that's got to have nothing to do with the turbo and you can't be putting boost in because the line pressure is got to be way more than the boost pressure is. Summit part number. Braxton, what's that the Summit part number for? I missed my old 84 Civic hatch. 12 valve, yeah. The early C4s with the manual trans have bigger Dana 44 rear diffs. Magna ride for the ZL1's hard to find. That's a cool technology, but seems really sophisticated and complicated. Why are all fast cars now all luxury cars? Well, this Corvette's not really a luxury car. I mean, it does have a lot of luxury, I guess, going on. Would be cool to see that turbo on a new Big Bang 351. I don't think we need a 107 to get where we need to go with the 351. Trans lines could be clogged on the cooler. Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. That would definitely make one side pop off more than the other, right? The in more than the out. Switch to hydraulic lines. I don't think I've ever run hose clamps on transmission fittings on the coolers in the past. And if I did, I'd definitely push the hose on past the lip and then do clamps on both sides of it. But it's always a fitting. Fine-tune the fuel pressure on my 454 Gen 6 pickup. It likes it at 62 PSI. Okay. It's faster 0 to 80 than my Corvette is. Wow. And is the motor all stock in that Gen 6 454? I think maybe since I raised the rev limiter, making more power, hoping to stall higher. Boosting a 2020 Corvette will be cheaper than the new Vet, so I figured too that they become more desirable. I just don't like the C8 body style. That's not for me. I'd rather have a boosted C6. Small copper inline fuel filters flow great, but impossible to clean them. Very difficult to find. Double flare and then double clamp. The $850 on 307mm turbo has been making 12 to 1300 wheel horsepower. Be interesting on the dyno. That doesn't seem like as much as I thought a 107mm turbo would make. I mean, we've done 1200 with an S480, but that's at the flywheel. Why does the C8 Z06 go only 195 when the Ford GT goes 216? Well, what are the power outputs of those two? And then is the Ford GT just a lot more aerodynamic? That BNR, that's interesting. Well, if you look at the power outputs and the torque outputs and the power curves of those two motors, the big block makes a lot more power than that motor does, than that TunePort motor does. Has anyone carved a 4200 yet? I've been curious about those engines. I don't know why it wouldn't work. Kyle Milligan has an 88mm turbo, is good for 1500. See, that's what I think. We ran 88mm turbos, and they're more like 1500. So I think a 107. I thought a 107 was going to be way above that. I thought that was going to be like a 2000 horsepower kind of thing. C8 Z06 is 670. Ford GT is 650. I don't know. Maybe it's an aero thing. Has the Moroso Copo Big Block Chevy racing pan on. Probably helps. Otherwise, a long block of stock and a high volume oil pump. Well, that's going to take all the power. But if we run both of those motors, I mean, the big block is going to make 70 or 80 more horsepower than the small block is, and the torque's going to be way up. Yeah, at least that much torque too. Do you remember Tim Richmond's Monte Carlo did 243? Yeah, Vince, we were talking about that earlier. It was a 962 versus a Cup Monte Carlo. But again, like we were talking about the beginning of this, like, and the story behind the Monte Carlo was that it just came from a race. All they did was clean it up. My guess is it had a good motor in it, because I don't know why they wouldn't do that. You're coming to a shootout, and you're coming to a shootout against a fancy wine and cheese Porsche thing. So why wouldn't you put like an unrestricted motor in it? But those cars are very aerodynamic. They're designed to go really fast with as little power as they were limiting them to. I think the Corvette ran out of gearing in 5th gear and couldn't pull the high 6th. What are you talking about? Are you talking about this latest one that went 233? It said in the thing that they were in top gear. It's hilarious passing people in new high-tech cars and pickups with a 454. Just think when you put the 100 shot on it, then it'd be good. Couple more minutes. Is there more left in the 233 mile an hour Corvette ZR1 if they change the gearing? 76%, 2/3, 3/4 of the people saying yes. Put some gear in that thing. There's no way it didn't get a gear change to go 243. Remember, how was a crew chief? Engine would be revving to 12,000 without a gear change. No, they did change the gearing in it. They went over that. Because did those have a quick change rear end in them, Dan? Does a Cup car have a quick change? Oh, Larry, the 195 C8, is that what you're talking about? Okay. The C8 ZR1 must have a lot of aero drag. I don't think that body configuration is very aerodynamic. It doesn't look like it. I haven't seen any numbers on it. All right, Ragtap, we'll see you later. Only a 9-inch quick changes weren't legal in Cup. Okay. Well, there's a lot of gear sets for 9 inches. So they could have brought whatever they wanted. I don't know what they run at. Like, what do they run at super speedways? Because at super speedways, they're going over 200, right? Even back in the 80s or early 90s, whenever this was. It should run 260 in theory. How would you think that that's the case? Do you know what the aero is in that car? The C5 Z06 is the most radical visceral Corvette. I think L88 guys or ZL1 guys would probably argue with that. Break a land speed record in a new Civic of some kind. I wouldn't choose a new Civic. I'd choose an older Civic. I'd choose an Insight probably would be the best one. I don't think that they picked the Corvette for I don't think they picked that body style for aero. Skull, is that directed at me? Because I don't have any drinks in front of me. It's all governed by NASCAR now. I know. I don't know. I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about in the 80s, back in the day. The Insight had the least drag on it. Yeah. The early Insight is the one that I want. First gen Insight. Yeah, those would be cool. I actually always wanted one of those cars with my Civic VX motor in it for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know that would do better than the Insight motor that was in there. Because I wanted to get rid of all the battery stuff. And I didn't want, everyone saying, oh yeah, put a Turbo K motor in it. Yeah, I'm not building a hot rod. I'm building a car that I want to get like 70 or 80 miles to the gallon. And I think that would have been a good one. But I'm also always thinking of not drag racing with a K series in it, but land speeding. Because if you can get the thing to go, 60 miles an hour with 9 horsepower, then you're like, oh, I'm starting to do the math now. We did that on the Civic VX because what I did was drive the car up and down stretches of the highway, and we data logged up here the speed and load where my vacuum gauge is running. And then we duplicated that on the dyno to see what that was in 5th gear running at that same vehicle speed at that same load. So we could duplicate it on the dyno because it's, you know, it's easy to do because the rollers are as much as that car weighs, probably a little more, but it's easy to do. And it was only about 10.5 or 11 horsepower. It wasn't very much. Which is why it got such phenomenal fuel mileage. That and running 18 or 19 to 1 air fuel and lean burn, that's really good. And what I was thinking of, I remember the rationale for wanting the Insight with the VX motor in it, the D15Z1 for the Honda guys, I was thinking that, okay, if it's more aerodynamic and there's less drag, then I could be out of like enrichment mode, because it had you know, lean burn and then regular enrichment mode, and then it also had VTEC beyond that. So you could be like 19 to 1, or you could be 14.7, or you could be trying to get power out of it. Big Red went 223 with 950 horsepower. Yeah, I'm familiar with a lot of the Big Red stuff because Eric from West Tech did a lot of the tuning for Big Red. I was impressed by the 21 Kia Forte. Got 43 miles per gallon going from San Francisco up to Tahoe. That seems pretty good. We're running a 3.0 gear, but depends on which size for stricter plate and which track. Did those cars back, like, Dan, I don't know when you were doing this, but didn't those cars go 200 back in the day, back in the 80s or 90s when that Monte Carlo would have been tested? What motor did they put the supercharger on? Who are you asking about that? Kyle, they put that turbo on a stock 5.3. Oh, but it had, so you're not saying it had a stock cam and stock valve springs. You're saying it was a 5.3 with cam and valve springs. So 1,200 wheel horsepower at 28 pounds. Okay, that seems right. Have you ever played with HHO? What is that? 69 Camaro is a brick for aero. Yeah, that's the. I mean, Big Red's an amazing car, but it's not very aerodynamic. Is that a bottle of Jack on the shelf? Where am I looking? Where are you looking at? No, there's no Jack Daniels up there that I see. I wouldn't have that on the shelf. It wouldn't be doing any good up here. $200 at Riverside 1 year. I geared the car to go 220 down the straight and it redlined during the race. It would go faster at Riverside because Riverside was a road course, right? BNR, what's fifth HE engine? That's the reason the big bubble hood on Big Res, my understanding, to smooth the airflow over the roof. And then also they tried a couple of different induction systems on there that require a cowl hood or a bigger hood. Is that a F-18 Hornet or Super Hornet behind you? Yes, it is. I don't remember which one it is, though. It's an F-18 EF Super Hornet. Yeah, these are all, well, on this side, these are all trophies. Up there and up there and up there. And that is a cup that somebody made for us that has a picture of my car, my Mustang, when I was out at the Silver State race. Oh, no restrictor plate at Riverside. Okay. Were those big blocks, Dan, back then? An 87 Prelude engine in the Civic. Nice. Riverside had the longest straightaway. Okay, cool. Hydrogen, oxy gas, splitting water, then burn in combustion engine. It enables very lean mixtures, helps reduce detonation. I don't know anything about that technology. I've never looked it up. Bobby, your Civic swap was back in '88. Chevy doesn't want its Corvette owners to know their Corvette is capable of 1,500 horsepower and Bugatti speed. Well, the thing is, like we talked about, is in a factory production deal, they they left room. They left some on the table. Okay, Dan, 358. But still, those had to be, and those are probably making more than the big blocks were by the late 80s or early 90s. Those are probably 850 horsepower or 900 horsepower motors then. Keeping the 340 together was challenging. The Mercedes AMG 1 has one less horsepower than the C8. It only goes 219. But does it only go 219? I'm going to look and see what an AMG 1 is. That's like a cool supercar. The one that I like, and this isn't it, right? I like the one that they built to compete against the McLaren F1 that Mercedes did. And then Porsche did one too. I like those. Maybe it's the overdrive gears eating up horsepower in the ZR1. $750 or so in the late 80s. The 850 horsepower engines didn't happen until early 2000s. Okay. 750 is still a lot. So, Monkey, you think that they should have brought back a 427 Cammer? That's really big and wide and heavy, too. Back in the day, were your cars and magazines? Yes. My Mustang was in a lot of them. In fact, I have a whole binder somewhere of all the... Because for a long time, it was the car that was in the most number of magazines, I remember. Because I went around to try to get it in everything. And it was in almost everything. Because I did so much stuff with it. But I wrote for all the magazines. So after a while, it's just like, I'm not trying to put my car in magazines. I'm now writing for the magazines and doing data testing and giving information, though. And the Civic was definitely in stuff because we wanted to promote that for the people that helped us out. Lucas Oil helped us with sponsorship on the Bonneville car. Ben, you played around with a little, have to be able to tune fuel injection because O2 tries to correct the mixture. Yeah, but only if you're running closed loop, though, right? Are 347 strokers? Yes. If you're talking about Fords, a 347 stroker is still way better than a 302 because it has more of everything. But a 351 or a 392 or a 408 stroker is even better. Okay, is there more left in the Corvette? 77% saying yes. We're going to end our poll. And on that note, friends, it is time to go. But the good news is I will see you guys all tomorrow.